Gland, anatomy and physiology. Now, the adrenal gland is also called the suprarenal gland. Let's first of all look at how this gland looks like. In fact, where it's even located. So this is how this gland looks like. Okay, this is how the adrenal gland looks like. So you see, this is the kidney. You know, we have two kidneys. The adrenal gland actually sits on top of the kidney. So let me go back quickly, fast, so that we look at how. So this is how the adrenal gland. So this is the adrenal gland. You see, this is the kidney. The adrenal gland actually sits on top of the kidney. That's why we also call it the suprarenal gland. That's another name, suprarenal gland. Is that okay? That's another name for the adrenal gland, suprarenal gland. Is that okay? It actually sits on top of the kidneys. Is that okay? So we also call it suprarenal gland. Suprarenal gland. Okay, so when you hear suprarenal gland, we are talking about adrenal gland. Why do we call it suprarenal gland? Supra meaning on top. Okay, it sits on top of the kidneys, suprarenal gland. Is that okay? And there are two, because you know we have two kidneys. So each of these kidneys, we have adrenal gland on top. That's so they are glands. So suprarenal glands. So there are two. The right suprarenal gland on the right kidney, the left suprarenal gland on the left kidney. Okay, and this gland is about 5 centimeters long, 3 centimeters wide, and 4 grams in adults. And they are located on top of each kidney like a cap. Is that okay? So that's what I was showing you in the diagram. So you see, they sit on top of each kidney like a cap. Is that okay? So they are located on top of each kidney like a cap. Is that okay? Now, the adrenal gland actually has two main regions, or you can say two main parts. Okay, this is it. It has two main parts. Okay, the two main parts, the first part, we call it adrenal medulla. And then the second part, we call it the adrenal cortex. Okay, so the adrenal gland has two main parts, the adrenal cortex and then the adrenal medulla. Okay, good. So remember, the adrenal gland has two main parts. The innermost part is the adrenal medulla. Say adrenal medulla. Say adrenal medulla.
Adrenal medulla.
Then adrenal cortex.
Adrenal cortex.
Adrenal medulla.
Adrenal medulla. Adrenal cortex.
What is the name given to the innermost portion of the adrenal gland?
Adrenal medulla.
What is the name given to the outermost portion of the adrenal gland?
Adrenal cortex.
Okay, so the innermost portion is the adrenal medulla, and then the outermost portion is the adrenal cortex. So practically, the adrenal gland is having two regions. The innermost region, which is the adrenal medulla, and then the outermost region, which is the adrenal cortex. The innermost region, which is the adrenal medulla, the outermost region, which is the adrenal cortex. Is that okay? Have you all gotten that part?
Yes, sir. Yes, please.
Good. Now, the innermost region, the outermost region has several divisions, and we will look at that. And that is the most important part I want you to concentrate on. Okay, when you take the outermost part, which is the cortex has 3 subzones, or you can say subdivisions. The cortex, it has 3 subdivisions. We have the zona glomerulosa, we have the zona fasciculata, the zona reticularis. These are the 3 divisions of the adrenal cortex. The zona glomerulosa, the zona fasciculata, the zona reticularis. Is that okay? Great. Hey. So we have the zona glomerulosa, the zona fasciculata, the zona reticularis. These are the 3 subdivisions of the adrenal cortex. So the adrenal cortex. So let's go back to the diagram. So I mentioned that the adrenal cortex, first of all, has how many divisions? 2 main divisions. What are the 2 main divisions?
The adrenal
Adrenal,
medulla and adrenal cortex.
Excellent. The adrenal medulla and the adrenal cortex. Now, what are the divisions of the adrenal cortex? What are the divisions of the adrenal cortex? Say it after me. Say zona glomerulosa.
There are 3 divisions. They are the
Zona glomerulosa.
Zona glomerulosa.
Say zona fasciculata.
Zona fasciculata and zona reticularis. Zona reticularis.
zona
Zona
glomerulosa.
glomerulosa.
Zona
Glomerulosa.
Lata.
Zona fasciculata.
Laris.
Zona
reticularis.
Okay, so you see the adrenal gland is having 2 divisions. The inner division, which we call the adrenal medulla, and the outer, which we call the adrenal cortex. The outer, which is the cortex, is further divided into 3. The outer, which is the adrenal cortex, is further has 3 zones. Is that okay? So the 3 zones. So you see the innermost part of the adrenal gland, the one they label is a gray. You see, that's the adrenal medulla. Okay. Then from the adrenal medulla, then that we come to the cortex. So from the adrenal medulla, all the other portions is the cortex. So you see, we have the zona reticularis, which is the innermost layer of the cortex. So you see, the cortex too is having 3 divisions. The innermost layer of the cortex, closer to the medulla, is what we call the zona reticularis. Then from the reticularis, the middle portion of the cortex, we call it the zona fasciculata. Then the outermost part of the cortex is the zona glomerulosa. Okay, so if I ask you, okay, what are the 2 main divisions of the adrenal gland? The adrenal medulla and the adrenal cortex. That's your answer. Now, what are the 3 subzones or divisions? Okay, what are the 2 main divisions of the adrenal gland? It's 2. Adrenal medulla, adrenal cortex. Okay. What are the 3 subdivisions of the adrenal cortex? The zona reticularis, zona fasciculata, zona glomerulosa. Okay, what is the innermost part of the adrenal cortex? What will be your answer? What is the innermost part of the adrenal cortex?
Zona fasciculata.
Who is saying fasciculata? What's the innermost part of the cortex?
Zona reticularis.
Reticularis. That's the part that is inside. What is the middle part of the adrenal cortex?
Zona fasciculata.
What is the outermost part of the adrenal cortex?
Zona glomerulosa.
So in general, when we ask you, what is the outermost part of the entire adrenal gland? What will be your answer?
Zona glomerulosa.
Adrenal cortex.
Cortex.
No, it's zona glomerulosa.
That's how interesting anatomy is. So that's zona glomerulosa. If we ask you what is the outermost division or part of the adrenal gland, that's zona glomerulosa. Is that okay?
Yes,
so when we say what is the outermost part of the entire adrenal gland, that's zona glomerulosa. Okay, what is the outermost part of the adrenal cortex? What will be your answer?
Adrenal cortex. Zona glomerulosa.
The question I asked, you didn't listen. No. What's the outermost part of the adrenal cortex? And you said you still repeated adrenal cortex as the answer. It's wrong.
No, I was asking.
The cortex. So what's the outermost part of the adrenal cortex?
Zona glomerulosa.
Zona glomerulosa. Is that okay? What is the middle part of the adrenal cortex?
Zona fasciculata.
Fasciculata. What is the innermost zone of the adrenal cortex?
Zona
reticularis.
Zona reticularis. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, listen to this one. What is the innermost portion or region of the adrenal gland? What would be your answer?
Adrenal medulla.
Adrenal medulla. Excellent. It shows that the concentration is solid. So if we ask you what is the innermost region of the adrenal gland, that is the adrenal medulla. But when we ask you what is the innermost division of the adrenal cortex, what would be your answer?
Zona fasciculata.
Hey, this lady, you are getting confused. So the innermost division of the cortex is not fasciculata. Oh. When we say innermost division of the cortex, is the part closer to the medulla. That's the innermost division. When we ask you the middle part of the cortex, that is when you say the zona fasciculata. Please be careful with it. Oh, this anatomy. When we ask you what is the innermost division of the cortex, is the portion closer to the medulla. That's the innermost. Is that okay? So when we ask you what is the innermost part of the cortex, that's the portion closer to the medulla. That's the zona reticularis. But when we ask you what is the middle portion of the adrenal cortex, then that one will become zona fasciculata. Is that what is the outermost part of the cortex?
Zona glomerulosa.
Zona glomerulosa. Okay, what if I ask you, what is the outer portion of the adrenal gland?
Adrenal cortex.
This is adrenal cortex. You see how the question is flowing. So all the time you should be very careful. When we ask you what is the outermost region of the adrenal gland, you see here, I'm using the adrenal gland. Then that one you go in for what? You go in for the adrenal cortex. Okay, what if a situation where, let's say, the adrenal cortex is not there? Which one? What that answer will you be looking for? I give you a question. Yes, zona glomerulosa. Yes, zona glomerulosa. So you see that same question. The answer can be zona glomerulosa. The answer can be what? The cortex. Okay, what if I ask you, what is the outermost portion of the adrenal cortex? What will be the answer?
Zona glomerulosa.
Okay. Which portion of the adrenal cortex is closest to the adrenal medulla? What will be your answer?
Zona reticularis.
This is how beautiful anatomy is. So, okay. Which portion of the adrenal cortex is far away from the adrenal medulla?
Zona
glomerulosa.
Okay. Which portion of the adrenal cortex is in between the zona reticularis and zona glomerulosa?
Zona
fasciculata.
Yes, what will be your answer?
Zona fasciculata.
That is excellent. That is excellent. Okay. Now, yes, please. Young man, ask your question, please.
Sir, please, you said talking about the outermost portion, you said that it is we didn't find the adrenal cortex, the answer must be the zona fasciculata. But I can see there is a capsule before the zona glomerulosa.
There is what?
There is a capsule before the zona.
We are not looking at the capsule here. We are not looking at the capsule. We are looking at the actual division of the gland. Is that okay? We are looking at the actual division of the gland. We are not looking at the capsule around the gland. Let us not go there yet. You see, so you see here, the divisions in the slide here. We've not spoke about the actual layer covering the gland itself. We are looking at the actual division of the gland itself. Is that okay? So you see, I was using portion. So if we ask you, okay, what is the outermost portion of the cortex? Then you are looking at zona glomerulosa. Is that okay? Fine. We have a capsule around the entire, adrenal gland, but that is the capsule is not considered part of the divisions when we are talking about the gland. Okay, so when we are looking at the zones of the gland, the zones are 3. Is that okay? The 2 main zones or the 2 main regions are the medulla and what? The cortex. Okay, then the cortex is also divided into 3 subzones. Is that okay? When we are talking about the zones, remember, don't talk about the capsule here.
Okay.
Is that okay? So when we ask you in anatomy, what are the 2 main regions of the adrenal gland? We have the cortex and the medulla. The adrenal cortex and the adrenal medulla. What are the 3 subdivisions or subzones of the cortex? Then you tell us the zona glomerulosa, the zona fasciculata, and zona reticularis. So over here, be very careful you don't get confused with the capsule around the entire, because here we are not looking at the structure, we are looking at the zones of the gland. So I get where you are coming from, and the reason why the concentration should be on the zones now is that after the zones, we are going to now talk about the hormonal functions of all the zones. Remember, the capsule is not a gland. The capsule is not an endocrine gland, though. The capsule don't produce any hormones. Okay, and that's why our concentration on the divisions, we are not interested in the capsule around it, because we are doing endocrine system. Now, all the zones that we've mentioned, they have endocrine roles. So, for example, if you take the zona glomerulosa, it has an endocrine role it plays. So, the interest in anatomy here with the adrenal gland is not just about the structure. No, we are doing endocrine system. So, all the divisions we are doing, they are endocrine related. So, for example, if you take the adrenal medulla, it has an endocrine role it plays. When you take the adrenal cortex, the adrenal cortex has an endocrine role it plays. So here, our emphasis is on the endocrine. Is that okay? That is why our emphasis is not so much on the capsule around it. Is that okay? Fine. It's good that you would know that around the cortex or around the zona glomerulosa, we have a broad capsule around it. It's good. But our interest at this level, where we are looking at the zones, don't go there yet. Is that okay? Yes. So here, don't go there yet. So here, know that the adrenal gland is having 2 broad regions. What are the 2 broad regions? The adrenal medulla, adrenal cortex. Now, the adrenal cortex is further divided into 3 zones. What are the 3 zones? The innermost zone is the zona reticularis. The middle zone is the zona fasciculata. The outermost zone is the zona glomerulosa. Is that okay? Great.
Yes, sir.
But beyond these zones, fine, we have a capsule. Usually around every organ, we usually have a fibrous capsule around it. That is fine. But here, this division, our interest is in the divisions comes with some endocrine responsibilities. That's why we only end there and will not emphasize on the capsules. Is that okay? All right, that is fine. That's fine. So here, we have the zona glomerulosa. So let's look at the hormones produced by the zona glomerulosa. So the zona glomerulosa, they secrete the mineralocorticoids. The mineralocorticoids is what we also call the aldosterone. The mineralocorticoids, we also call them the aldosterone. Then we have the zona fasciculata. They secrete the glucocorticoids. The glucocorticoids is what we also call the cortisol. Then we have the zona reticularis. They secrete the sex. Oh, we are getting unusual feedback. The zona reticularis, they secrete the sex steroids. Is that okay? Then the medulla, the adrenal medulla, they contain chromaffin cells and they secrete what we call catecholamines. When we say catecholamines, they are the epinephrine and norepinephrine. That is what we call the catecholamines. Is that okay? Epinephrine and norepinephrine. That is what we call the catecholamines. Okay. So the adrenal gland has two main divisions. What are the two main divisions? Adrenal medulla and then the adrenal cortex. The adrenal cortex has how many zones? It's further divided into 3 zones. What are the 3 zones? The innermost zone is the zona reticularis. What hormone does it produce? They secrete the sex steroids. Say sex steroids.
Sex
Sex
steroid.
steroid.
Sex steroids.
Sex
Say it
steroid.
again. Please. Another name for example of some of these sex steroids, we have the dihydroepialdosterone. Say dihydroepialdosterone. Say dihydroepialdosterone.
They are zero
That's third.
Epialdosterone.
Aldosterone.
Dehydroepialdosterone.
Reticularis, which is part of the cortex, they produce the dihydroepialdosterone, and they are the sex steroids. Okay. Then we have the zona fasciculata. Say zona fasciculata.
Zona fasciculata.
That secretes the glucocorticoids. Say glucocorticoids.
Glucocorticoids.
Glucocorticoid.
Corticoids.
Glucocorticoids.
Glucocorticoid.
Corticoids. That is what we call another example of the glucocorticoids is what we call the cortisol. Cortisol. Then we have the zona glomerulosa. They secrete mineralocorticoids. Say mineralocorticoids.
Mineralocorticoid.
Mineralocorticoids.
Mineralocorticoids. Mineralocorticoids.
It is what we call aldosterone. Say aldosterone. Say aldosterone. If you remember very well, you mentioned this aldosterone when you were learning RAS. You remember in RAS, when you learn to a certain level, when the angiotensin 2 is being produced, one of the functions of the angiotensin 2 is that it stimulates the adrenal gland to release aldosterone. Do you remember? In the RAS, you remember you learned in the RAS that when the angiotensin 2 is produced, one of the functions of angiotensin 2 is that it will stimulate the adrenal cortex to produce the aldosterone. Aldosterone is an example of a mineralocorticoid. Is that okay? It's an example of a mineralocorticoid. Is that okay? So when we say mineralocorticoids, they are the aldosterone. When you hear mineralocorticoid, it's aldosterone we are talking about. It's not something new. So when you hear someone say mineralocorticoid, they are talking about aldosterone. Is that okay? So the zona glomerulosa is the zona glomerulosa that produces the mineralocorticoids or the aldosterone. The zona fasciculata is what produces the glucocorticoids or the cortisol. Now, these cortisols, they play the role of anti-inflammation. Is that okay? Because you see, sometimes in your body, if inflammatory process is going on so much, it can cause a problem. Okay, because you see, imagine in your body, you get an injury and the wound is healing and there is no mechanism to stop the healing. It means that the tissue that are forming, it can form until it become cancerous. Another example is, imagine in your body, you have an infection and your antibodies are fighting and they never stop. There will be coas in your body. So, for example, you have malaria. Your body is fighting the malaria. And the fighting is going on now. It never stops. Even when the malaria parasite is no more in your body. Imagine what will happen. So we have the glucocorticoids. What they do is they are anti-inflammatory. So when we say something is anti-inflammatory, meaning it stops inflammation or it acts against inflammatory process. Is that okay? And that is the zona fasciculata. They secrete the glucocorticoids. What are glucocorticoids? Example is cortisol. What do? They are anti-inflammatory. And sometimes some people will have conditions, they give them corticosteroids. Some of you've gotten some infection before, you went to the hospital, they gave you corticosteroids. You know why? Because you see, if you are having a condition like a respiratory infection and you are coughing, you are sneezing, it's never stopping. It means your body is fighting a lot of inflammatory activities are going on. So they have to give you a medicine that will bring the inflammatory activity down. Example of those medicine is corticosteroids. And your body naturally produces corticosteroids, just that sometimes we have to supplement them with synthetic medications. Is that okay? So the zona fasciculata, they secrete the glucocorticoids, example, corticosteroids. And the zona reticularis, they secrete the sex steroids. Is that okay? So the sex steroids like dihydroepialdosterone is a precursor for sex hormones. Okay, so for example, if someone is having a low libido, it could be the problem is coming from the adrenal cortex, the zona reticularis. It could be that the zona reticularis is not secreting enough of the sex steroids. Is that okay? Because you see, these sex steroids, they are responsible for the female, androgens, libido, sex hormones, and all of that. Okay. Now, the adrenal medulla, on the other hand, they produce the epinephrine and norepinephrine. Epinephrine and norepinephrine. What's the function of epinephrine? Epinephrine plays a role. When we say epinephrine, they are responsible for sympathetic activities. And when we say norepinephrine, the norepinephrine is responsible for parasympathetic activities. When we say epinephrine, it's a hormone produced by the adrenal medulla. They are responsible for sympathetic activities. And when we say norepinephrine, these are hormones also produced by the medulla. They are responsible for parasympathetic activities. For the last time, when we say adrenal medulla, it produces two hormones. Now remember, the hormones produced by the adrenal medulla, the two hormones together, we call them catecholamines. Say catecholamines. Say catecholamines.
Catecholamines.
Say it again. Say catecholamines.
Catecholamines.
The last time, say catecholamines.
Catecholamines.
In physiology, when we say catecholamines, we are talking about epinephrine and norepinephrine. So if someone asks you, okay, which hormone, which gland produces catecholamines, you can tell the person, oh, it's the adrenal gland. But then remember, the adrenal gland is into two, the cortex and medulla. It's the medulla that produces the catecholamines. So if we ask you in anatomy, okay, which gland produces catecholamines, what would be your answer?
Adrenal medulla.
The adrenal medulla. So you can say the adrenal gland, but specifically the adrenal medulla. Is that okay? Okay, if we ask you which part, okay, if I ask you which part of the adrenal gland produces aldosterone, what would be your answer?
Zonal glomerulosa.
So let me show you the trick. You say it this way. You say that if we ask you which part of the adrenal gland produces the aldosterone, you say the adrenal cortex, but inside the adrenal cortex, the zona glomerulosa. Do you get it? Okay. Which part of the adrenal gland produces epinephrine?
The adrenal medulla.
The adrenal medulla.
Excellent. That one is the adrenal medulla. Okay. When we say catecholamines, what does it mean? When we say catecholamines, what does it mean? When we say catecholamines, what does it mean?
The collective name for epinephrine and not epinephrine.
Excellent. Collective name for epinephrine and norepinephrine. Excellent. That's the collective name for epinephrine and norepinephrine. So when we say catecholamines, that's the collective name for epinephrine and norepinephrine. Okay, when we say okay, which part of the adrenal gland produces the glucocorticoids?
The zonal
The adrenal
fasciculata.
cortex,
The
specifically
adrenal
the
cortex.
zona,
Excellent. I like how you started. The adrenal cortex.
specifically the zona fasciculata.
The adrenal cortex, specifically the zona fasciculata. Okay. Okay. Which part of the adrenal gland produces dehydroepialdosterone?
The adrenal cortex,
Uh-huh.
specifically the zona reticularis.
The adrenal cortex, specifically the zona reticularis. Okay. Okay. Which part of the adrenal gland produces the sex hormones?
The
Adrenal
adrenal
cortex.
cortex, specifically the
Zonal
zona
reticularis.
reticularis.
That in exams, if we ask you which portion of the adrenal gland produces sex steroids, it means you are looking out for two answers. So, one, you are looking out for adrenal cortex, and again, you are also looking out for the zona reticularis. Any of them can appear as an answer. Is that okay? So when we ask you
Okay.
which part of the adrenal gland produces the cortisol, what would be the answers we are looking for?
The
Adrenal
adrenal cortex and the zona fasciculata.
Good. So the adrenal cortex and the zona fasciculata. So what that means is if this is an MCQ and we ask you which portion of the adrenal gland produces the cortisol, you are looking for two things. You are looking for one, the adrenal cortex itself, and two, you are looking for the zona fasciculata of the adrenal cortex. Is that okay?
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
that is fine. Okay, so and remember I told you epinephrine and norepinephrine, they are produced by the adrenal medulla. And you know epinephrine is responsible for increase. Remember that epinephrine is responsible for increasing activity in your body. Norepinephrine is responsible for decreasing activity in your body. Is that okay?
Yes, sir.
Epinephrine is responsible for increasing activity in your body. Norepinephrine is responsible for decreasing activity in your body. So if we want your heart rate to go down, adrenal gland can produce the norepinephrine. If we want your heart rate to go up, medulla can produce what we call the epinephrine. So epinephrine is responsible for increasing activity. So if you want your heart rate to increase, if you want your blood glucose, if you want your respiratory rate to increase, is that okay? Your medulla will produce epinephrine. So remember that epinephrine is responsible for what? Increasing activity. Norepinephrine is responsible for what? Decreasing activity. Is that okay? Good. What
Yes.
type of cells do we have in the adrenal medulla? What type of cells do we have in the adrenal medulla?
Chromaffin cells.
Good. The chromaffin cells. Okay, those are the cells that we have in the adrenal medulla. So in the adrenal medulla, we have it contains the chromaffin cells, and it's the chromaffin cells that produces the catecholamines. Is that okay? So let's go back to the diagram. So you see how
Sir,
the
please, I
diagram
have
looks
a
like.
question.
Yes, ask your question, young lady.
Sir, please, you said the adrenal medulla produces the two hormones, which is the epinephrine and non-epinephrine. When I was reading, I came across a statement that the adrenal medulla produces small amounts of dopamine. Say, say,
Hello, hello, hello,
say.
hello, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Dopamines are also, all of
Yes,
them are
sir.
under catecholamines. Dopamines and all those things, they are all under catecholamines.
Okay.
Yes, dopamines epinephrine, norepinephrine is the same class of hormones. All of them are under catecholamines.
Okay.
Yes, so it's a correct statement. So when we say dopamine, epinephrine, norepinephrine, all of them are under catecholamines. Okay, so let's come back to the diagram. So you see the diagram. So you see this diagram will make things very simple. So you see we have the part of the adrenal gland. So we have the medulla down here. So you see the medulla is down here. So the medulla, we have the zona. From the medulla, the top part is the adrenal cortex. So you see from here coming down, that's the cortex. So we have the zona reticularis. What does the reticularis produce? The sex hormones. We have the zona fasciculata. What does the zona fasciculata produce? The glucocorticoids or the cortisol. The zona glomerulosa. What does it produce? Mineralocorticoids. Is that okay?
Aldosterone.
So what does the adrenal medulla produce? What hormones does the adrenal medulla produce?
The
catecholamines.
The catecholamines. What are the catecholamines?
epinephrine and then
Norepinephrine. Okay, now let's come to the cortex. So if we ask you that, in general, what hormones does the adrenal cortex produce? What will be your answer? In general, what hormones does the adrenal cortex produce? How will you answer that question?
Produce steroid hormones.
No.
Yeah.
No.
the cortisol.
No.
Aldosterone, cortisol, and hydroepialdosterone.
Excellent. Now that you've answered. So when we ask you in general, what hormones that the adrenal cortex produce, what it means is that you have to tell us all the 3 hormones produced by the zones. You get it? You not mention one. So if we ask you in general, what hormones does the adrenal cortex produce? Then you are going to say, okay, the adrenal cortex produces the aldosterone, cortisol, and then the sex hormones. You have to list all the 3. Is that okay? And you see, the 3 together is what we call the cortical hormones. Say cortical hormones. Say cortical hormones. So when we say cortical hormones, we are talking about all the hormones produced by the adrenal cortex. So in anatomy and physiology, when you hear cortical hormones, we are talking about the hormones produced by the adrenal cortex. So the mineralocorticoids, the glucocorticoids, and the aldosterone. So anytime you hear cortical hormones, we are talking about mineralocorticoids, glucocorticoids, and then the sex hormones. Okay, what if we tell you what are the adrenal hormones? What will be your answer? Adrenal hormones. When we say adrenal hormones, what will be your answer?
Adrenal hormones are
The
hormones and
aldosterone, corticoid.
Take your time. Take your time. Relax. So when I ask you that, mention the adrenal hormones. How will you answer it?
The aldosterone, the cortisol, the sex hormones, and then catecholamines.
Good. Excellent. So in this situation, you list all the hormones produced at the cortex. Then you add the medulla. So you are reading in the textbook and you see, adrenal hormones. So it means that one, they are talking about all the hormones, including the one produced by the medulla. But if you are reading a book and you see the cortical hormones, that one, they are talking about adrenal cortex alone. So the cortical hormones, they are the hormones, the mineralocorticoids, the glucocorticoids, and the sex hormones. So please, all the time, be sharp. So anytime you hear cortical hormones, they are talking about hormones produced by the adrenal cortex. Okay. Anytime you hear medullary hormones, those ones are the catecholamines. And you hear medullary hormones, they are talking about the catecholamines. Please, are we together?
Yes.
Are we together? That is excellent. So let's do a simple. Yes, please. Someone wanted to ask a question? Okay. So you see, so the lady that asked the question, you see in the notes, it's even there. So you see the the catecholamines, you see we have the epinephrine. The epinephrine is what we also call adrenaline. It's the same name. Anytime you hear adrenaline, it's the same as epinephrine, the same word. And anytime you hear norepinephrine, it's the same as noradrenaline. It's the same thing. Okay, then we have the dopamine. It produces dopamine in small amounts. Is that okay? And this is what we call the medullary hormones. Medullary hormones. Okay, so the medullary hormones, they are the epinephrine or adrenaline, norepinephrine or noradrenaline, and we have the dopamine. Is that okay? So, what are the two main divisions of the adrenal gland? What are the two main divisions of the adrenal gland?
Adrenal cortex.
Adrenal cortex and adrenal medulla.
The adrenal cortex and the adrenal medulla. Excellent. The adrenal cortex and the adrenal medulla. Okay, what are the divisions of the adrenal cortex?
The zonal
Zonal
glomerular, the
zonal
zonal
fasciculata,
the zonal
zonal
fasciculata and zona reticularis.
What is the middle zone of the adrenal cortex?
the
zonal fasciculata,
The
Zona
zona
fasciculata.
fasciculata. Which zone of the adrenal cortex? Which zone of the adrenal cortex is closer to the adrenal medulla?
the zonal
Reticularis.
Reticularis. Okay. Which zone of the adrenal cortex is the outermost zone?
the zona glomerulosa.
The zona glomerulosa. The zona glomerulosa. Okay. Which zone of the adrenal cortex secretes the aldosterone?
The zona glomerulosa.
The zona glomerulosa. Which zone of the adrenal cortex secretes the sex hormones?
Zona
reticularis,
The zona reticularis. Which zone of the adrenal cortex secretes the cortisol hormones?
zona fasciculata,
The zona fasciculata. Okay, now one of the following hormones is not part of the cortical hormones. Please listen carefully.
Okay.
One of the following hormones is not part of the cortical hormones. A, aldosterone. B, sex hormones. C, cortisol. And D, noradrenaline.
non-adrenaline,
Noradrenaline. That's the correct answer. Is that okay? Now, another question. The following hormones are produced by the adrenal medulla, except the following hormones are produced by the adrenal medulla, except A, dopamine, B, epinephrine, C, norepinephrine, and D, aldosterone. What would be your answer?
Aldosterone. Aldosterone.
Yes, what would be your answer?
Aldosterone.
Yes, what would be your answer?
Aldosterone.
Aldosterone. That is correct. That is aldosterone. That is aldosterone. Okay, that is fine. Okay. The zona fasciculata of the adrenal cortex secretes one of the following hormones. A, epinephrine. B, dopamine. C, sex steroids. And D, cortisol. What would be your answer?
Cortisol.
That is cortisol. Here we are talking about zona fasciculata. Is that okay? Zona fasciculata. Is that okay? Now pay attention to this diagram very well. Okay? Pay attention. It's something that we can examine you on. We can just give the diagram to you, then label A, B, C, D, E, then you write. So the inner, if we've labeled the inner, then you write medulla or medulla. You write it there. Is that okay? Or if it is MCQ, then you choose, oh, A represents the medulla, then other options will be there. Then you circle it. That if it is A, is the medulla, then you just circle it. Okay. After the medulla, you know the next zones are for the adrenal cortex. So after the medulla, the next layer or zone is the zona reticularis. Then the middle zone is the zona fasciculata. Then the outermost zone is the zona glomerulosa. Is that okay? So pay attention to. So here the table also explains it. So you see, this is the adrenal cortex, the outer layer. So you see, we have the adrenal cortex. Okay, so the zona glomerulosa, that's the outermost, the zona fasciculata, the middle layer, the zona reticularis, that's the innermost layer. And the zona glomerulosa is what produces the aldosterone. Is that okay? What does aldosterone do? Aldosterone works, the target organ for aldosterone is the kidneys. What will it do at the kidneys? It promotes potassium excretion and also what regulates blood pressure. What does aldosterone do? It helps with reabsorption of what? Sodium. Is that okay? Remember, you learned this in RASO. Aldosterone help with reabsorption of sodium. And remember, there is a mechanism, there is a physiological mechanism. Anytime sodium is reabsorbed, potassium leaves. So anytime, so nobody have to tell you. So you see, if you are reading a textbook and they tell you that aldosterone promotes potassium excretion, don't go and say that you didn't see it help with sodium absorption. It's the same. Anytime potassium is being excreted, automatically, don't let us tell you sodium will be reabsorbed. It's an opposite mechanism. It's just like calcium and phosphate. What the landlady was asking previously is the same mechanism. Anytime sodium is going in, potassium come out. So if I tell you aldosterone helps with potassium excretion, don't ask, don't wait for me to tell you, then automatically it will help with sodium absorption. It's the same. Is that okay? So anytime potassium is being excreted, sodium is being reabsorbed back. Okay. It's an opposite or an antagonistic mechanism. Now, the zona fasciculata, what does it do? It produces what? The cortisol. Is that okay? And cortisol, what does it do? It promotes gluconeogenesis. It stimulates fat and protein breakdown. It suppresses immune and inflammatory responses. Okay. Then we have the zona reticularis. That's the sex hormones. So the sex hormones, we have the dihydroepialdosterone, we have the androstenedione, we have the estradiol. Is that okay? And these hormones, so for example, the dihydroepialdosterone, it targets the gonads, the skin, the brain, the maxills. In fact, these are all together. We call them the sex hormones. Okay. The androstenedione is the same as the dihydroepialdosterone. Okay, great. And these sex hormones are responsible for your sexual function, like production of sex hormones like the testosterone, libido, your muscle growth, your bone growth, and all of that. These hormones are responsible for that. If your muscles have to grow, if your bone have to grow, your sexual libido and all of that is controlled by these sex hormones. Okay, so this diagram is also the same thing. It's showing, you see, we have the medulla and then we have the cortex. And if you come over here, you see, we have the adrenal medulla is down here. So the down portion is the adrenal medulla. Then from there, this portion is the cortex. So we have the zona reticularis of the adrenal cortex. We have the zona fasciculata of the adrenal cortex, the zona glomerulosa of the adrenal cortex. And here is showing the hormones. So the zona glomerulosa, the mineralocorticoids, the zona fasciculata, the glucocorticoids, the zona reticularis, the androgens, then we have the adrenal medulla, the catecholamines, the epinephrine, and norepinephrine. Is that so? Basically, this is it for the adrenal gland. This diagram also summarizes the adrenal gland. So you see, we have the medulla down here. We have the zona reticularis, the zona fasciculata, the zona glomerulosa, and the outermost anatomical part, the capsule. Is that okay? Great. So here too is showing the medulla and the cortex. This diagram to the same thing. It's also teaching. So you see the catecholamines. We have the epinephrine, the norepinephrine, and the dopamine. The epinephrine, the norepinephrine, and the dopamine. The innermost region is the medulla. Next to the medulla is the zona reticularis. After the zona reticularis, the middle portion is the zona fasciculata, and the outermost portion is the zona glomerulosa. Is that okay? The zona glomerulosa. Is that okay? So you have to learn and know the hormones that each of them produce. Is that okay? No. So when we say the medulla, adrenal medulla, which hormone does the adrenal medulla produce? What will be your answer? Which hormones does the adrenal medulla produce? Yes. The catecholamines. What are the catecholamines?
The epinephrine and the non-epinephrine.
And the dopamine. So the epinephrine, the norepinephrine, and the dopamine. What is another name for epinephrine? Adrenaline. What is another name for norepinephrine? Noradrenaline. Okay. What hormones does the zona reticularis produce? What hormones does the zona reticularis produce? The zona reticularis. The sex hormones. Okay. The androgens, the dihydroepialdosterone. You get. Okay. What hormones does the zona fasciculata produce? Yes. Simple. Cortisol. Simple. Just say cortisol. Is that okay? If you want to say glucocorticoids too, that is fine. But simple, say cortisol hormones, the cortisols. Okay. What hormones does the zona glomerulosa produce?
Aldosterone.
Aldosterone or mineralocorticoids. Okay, what are the cortical hormones?
The aldosterone,
cortisol,
and
the sex hormones.
Good. The cortisol, aldosterone, and the sex hormones. That is excellent. So this brings us to the end of the adrenal gland anatomy and physiology. Okay, so this is a very interesting gland. So for you as a nurse, this gland is very important because you see, we have several conditions, medical conditions that you need to understand these glands to appreciate those conditions. So for example, if you take a condition like Addison's disease, in this condition, there is a reduction, there is decreased production of the adrenal hormones. So we call it adrenal insufficiency. Meaning in this condition, the adrenal hormones decreases. Is that so? So when we say adrenal hormone production or the adrenal activity decreases, what it means is that the medulla hormones will go down. Okay. The cortical hormones will also go down. So it means this person will lack the sex hormones. This person will lack the how do we call it? The aldosterone. This person will lack the cortisol. Is that okay? So in this situation, it means, so imagine someone who is lacking aldosterone. It means this person can experience hypotension because you see, if you have aldosterone, that is when sodium is being reabsorbed. And as sodium is being reabsorbed, that is when water follows. So if a person is lacking aldosterone, it means the person can get hypotension. Okay, and that is a cardinal sign of Addison's disease. So if you're a nurse and a patient comes to your ward with Addison's disease, you would appreciate it. That, oh, okay, you are having Addison's disease. Addison's disease is a condition where cortical hormones goes down. The adrenal function, we call it adrenal insufficiency, meaning adrenal activity reduces. Is that okay? So in this condition, the person is going to have a problem with the, production of the adrenal hormones. So every function, so it means this person will even have low libido. Okay, this person would have problems with cortisol. So the person will have problems with inflammation, autoimmune problems. So the person's own antibodies may even be fighting their own organs. Autoimmune infections. Is that okay? Because cortisol levels will go down. Is that okay? This patient can end up getting, problems with, hyperpigmentation. They may get problems like aldosterone deficiency. And when we talk of Cushing's syndrome is also a situation where there is adrenal sufficiency, meaning the adrenal gland is overworking. That is what we call adrenal sufficiency, meaning adrenal gland is overworking. So you can imagine if adrenal gland is overworking, it means the person will have a high libido. It means aldosterone will be produced in excess. This person can have hypertension. Is that cortisol will also be produced in excess. This person will have problems with inflammation. Is that okay? So your understanding of the adrenal gland anatomy is very, very important as a nurse. Is that okay? If a patient, imagine a patient having Cushing's syndrome, the medulla too, the adrenal gland includes the cortex and the medulla. It means the medulla too overproducing their hormones. This person can end up getting hypertension because of the increased production of the medullary hormones. Is that okay? So yes, so you need to appreciate this gland a lot. Is that okay? Appreciate this gland a lot. Okay. And again, in a situation, we have a condition we call pheochromocytoma. When we say pheochromocytoma, this is a condition where someone is having a problem. The adrenal medulla is overworking. Okay. So with pheochromocytoma, specifically, is the adrenal medulla where we have the problem, not the entire adrenal gland. So when we say pheochromocytoma, this is a situation where someone is having hyperactivity of the adrenal medulla. So you can imagine, if your adrenal medulla is overworking, it means you are going to be producing more of the epinephrine. And this person is going to have hypertension, serious form of hypertension. Is that okay? The blood pressure will go up very, very, very high. Is that okay? All right. So basically, that is it for the adrenal gland anatomy and physiology. I think we can end over here on this note for today. I would like to take some questions from you. Do you have questions on what we've done on adrenal gland anatomy? So what have you learned about the adrenal gland? Where is the gland located? Where is this gland located?
It's on top of the kidney.
Good. How many adrenal glands do we have?
We have two.
We have two adrenal glands. Yes, excellent. We have two adrenal glands. Okay. What are the two main regions of the adrenal gland?
The adrenal medulla, adrenal cortex.
The adrenal medulla and the adrenal cortex. That is excellent. Adrenal medulla and adrenal cortex. What are the divisions of the adrenal cortex?
The zona
Zona
glomerulosa,
glomerulosa,
Uh-huh.
lata, the zona reticularis.
Uh-huh. And the zona reticularis. Okay, mention the cortical hormones.
That's around the cortisol and the sex hormones.
Excellent. Mention the medullary hormones.
The catecholamines.
Uh-huh. The catecholamines. What are the catecholamines?
The epinephrine, the non-epinephrine, the dopamine.
Epinephrine and dopamine. That is excellent. Okay. Which part of the adrenal gland produces the catecholamines?
The adrenal medulla.
The adrenal medulla. The adrenal medulla. Which part of the adrenal gland produces the cortical hormones?
Adrenal.
The adrenal cortex. That is excellent. The adrenal cortex. Okay. If someone is having hyperactivity of the adrenal medulla, what condition can the person get?
Cushing's syndrome.
Yes, Cushing's syndrome can be one of them. And then what other condition? Hyperactivity specifically of the adrenal medulla. Yes, hyperactivity specifically of the adrenal medulla. Pheochromocytoma. Is that okay? Okay, if someone is having insufficient activity of the adrenal gland, what condition do we call? What is that condition?
Addison's disease.
Addison's disease. Addison's disease. Okay, if someone is having hyperactivity of the entire adrenal gland, what is the condition? Hyperactivity of the entire adrenal gland. What condition is that? Hyperactivity.
Cushing's syndrome.
Yes, that's Cushing's syndrome. That's Cushing's syndrome. Is that okay? All right. So that is fine. I think we can end here for today. So I wish you all the best. Is that okay? I wish you guys all the best. Visit everything we've discussed today